Welcome to. Okay, thank you. Welcome to this meeting of the Rutland Sacre. Welcome to everybody. Can you please mute if you're not speaking, so that we can make sure we don't have any kickbacks on the sound? And just got James just coming in, so let's just give him a hand. Good of.
Hello.
Hi, James. Hi, Good.
Thank you for opening the door.
Open the door. We've literally just this minute not quite started, so just welcoming everybody. So I'll welcome you two to the meeting as well, to this Sacre meeting. We've all got the agenda, so we'll start off with any apologies. Joe, please.
Thank you, Chair. We've had apologies from Megan Davis and Andreas Menzies.
Okay, has anyone else got any apologies to relay? No. And now we'll have our moment of reflection. We gather together here today intent on doing good work. We seek to represent fairly and well those who have given us this task. May our efforts be blessed with insight, guided by understanding and wisdom. We seek to serve with respect for all, and may our personal beliefs give us strength to act honestly and well in all matters before us. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is to approve the meeting held on Tuesday, the 27th of April. Is there anyone prepared to propose that we accept those minutes? Should have said either put your hand up or your virtual hand. Good, thank you. And Andrew. Thank you. Matters arising from those minutes, I think we've covered them all elsewhere in this meeting, unless anyone's got anything specific that is not covered.
I just wish to apologise for not sending the stuff round prior to this meeting. I sent it to Amanda and forgot to pass it on to governance for circulation. I believe it's just been circulated.
Yes, it has now. Thank you. Okay, that was an action from last time, which has
my apologies.
No, apologies noted, no problem. Okay, so no other matters arising. The next item, item 5, report from the Sacre conference, which, because it was on Zoom this year, both myself and James Werter actually were able to attend, which was great actually, and I found it really interesting. James, do you want to do a quick verbal report on what you got out of that conference? Can you come off mute? You're still on mute, James. Thank you.
Hello, I'm back in the land of the living again. I would very much like to, if I could find my notes. There was a very good write-up, actually, a summary which was sent back to us, which I'm sure you got, Rosemary. But
yes, there was an actual link with
they had two keynote speeches.
Sorry, you've frozen, James.
Yes, sorry, I noticed that something had gone wrong. But I was going to say that the day was split into 2 keynote speeches, and then there were other talks and breakout groups to go to. The first keynote, let me just say immediately that the authority in religion, worldviews and religious education. And I in particular found this very interesting and worthwhile to engage with, thinking about nations, of which Sacre is one. Schools, of course, individual schools are another. But there are all sorts of other sources of authority, legislation, and also the professional bodies, the Sacre, and all sorts of other bodies that are guiding the discussion on religious education.
Sorry, James.
There's also, of course, the academics.
Sorry, James, can I just interrupt you? Can everybody hear James okay? It's sort of coming and going.
Have we got problems with the sound?
Yes, I don't know if maybe you could be a bit closer to your computer or maybe a bit further away to try. I don't know.
This reminds me of
Sorry,
the time. Sorry, was someone saying something?
Yeah,
Lucy. So I was about to say possibly come off camera because it might be your broadband width.
Yes, it
sorry,
might
Chair.
be.
That sometimes
fact,
works for me.
Yeah, okay. we're both actually. My wife's also, I think, on Zoom at the moment, so things are, slightly. We're squeezing,
That's better.
Good.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Would you like to carry on then? Thank you.
Well, thank you. So, sources of authority, and what I hope you all heard were the various different sources of authority that's worth thinking about when we're talking about RE, and also the way that we as a Sacre are engaging with the subject, and all those organisations or bodies, or the, as I say, sources of authority that we're actually having to work with, take note of, think about, and work within that structure. So I thought that was very, very useful indeed. The second keynote speaker in the afternoon was the HMI Inspector for Religious Education, whose name is Richard Q. And he was very erudite and gave his reflection based on research and the results of their inspections. So that was quite wide ranging, but for me, I felt he managed to focus really on the needs of RE. And the great thing for me, I felt, is this HMI inspector who is really the specialist for RE within the HMI structure, was basically on the side of RE. I felt he was very positive and was working very well actually within the wider organisation and structures of religious education. So I came away thinking very positively and very pleased with the way that RE is highly regarded in education, and that there seems to be a real impetus now in trying to regain, if you like, the ground that RE seems to have lost in the last few years. One of the key things is to try and improve the profile of RE, to try and enforce, or however you do it, the fact that RE is still a statutory subject that needs to be taught in schools, and how we can try and regain that ground. So yeah, that's probably as far as I can go at the moment, unless you have any questions.
Thank you very much, James. If I can just add to that, yeah, I support that. It was very inspiring and very thinking that actually there's a lot of people really passionate and working together on this, the whole idea of the authority in RE, and they like developing a tapestry of ideas, something I wrote down. And also about the opposite, he said, I think he said more than 50% of secondary school teachers didn't have any qualifications in RE, which sort of emphasised where it's at in some places. So yeah, really interesting keynote speakers and thought-provoking. And then there were some workshops as well in the morning, the afternoon. So James and I did different ones. I did the probably more boring ones actually, which was about the data on, they'd done a survey on how Sacres were funded. And it was, I think the difficulty is pulling out of local authorities, as we found when we were answering that question here, which exact pot of money it comes from, because it doesn't tend to have a budget as such, but it sits within the central schools block. And I think that'll be something that we need to dive a bit deeper into when we're looking at costs of the agreed syllabus. But the results of the survey were seen to be that Sacre was hardly funded at all, and basically had not much in the way of budgets, or it wasn't very clear about how Sacre was funded. Data on, oh yeah, and also about annual reporting, which they're going to produce a new template, which I think will help us when we, in our annual reporting, really focusing on sort of outcomes and how Sacre should be sort of reporting their work to get other people engaged more widely, and the Ofsted. So yeah,
one of the good things about going to a conference like this is that you get to hear about what's current and what's available, and you can actually set your agenda by many of the things that come out from such a conference.
Yeah, great.
There is, by the way, supposed to be a guidance note that has been produced on budgets for Sacres. I don't know whether you've seen it. I've just been trying to find it as I'm flitting around.
Okay, I'll try and find it.
Yeah, I hope you've had it actually. If not, I can probably try and find it and send it to you.
Yeah, that would be helpful. Thank you. On the agenda, there was a link to the conference papers and materials. So if anyone wants to look at more detail in the summary of the discussion and the slides, they're all on the Sacre website. Brilliant. Has anyone got any questions for James or I in relation to anything that's just been said? Good, Ev.
Just one general question. Did you find that from what you heard, that there was a compelling case to change the balance in how RE is seen compared to other subjects? Otherwise, it would just be more of the same, just nice words.
Yeah.
Yes. Shall I have a go first? Right.
Maybe put your video off again.
I mean, I think this is a very current question that you ask. Oh dear. A very current question that you're asking at the moment. And that is one of the agendas in RE, is to make the subject certainly on a par with all other subjects in the curriculum. And there's a great deal of work being done by the REC and RE Today and all sorts of other organisations academically as well, who are putting a lot of thought into changing the structure of the subject, changing the approach of the subject, and trying to define the subject so that actually it's fit for a modern curriculum and for schools to really want to take it on board and for children to get excited about it. So, and I've actually, there's been a conference going on for the last couple of days as well. And that is the Sacre conference, which sits above Sacre. And there are all sorts of both advisors, diocesan advisors or local authority advisors for RE, and also academics and school practitioners who are all coming together to talk about the subject. And we've heard some extremely good examples of good RE and the way that RE is actually being developed. So yeah, there's thinking about curriculum development, about entitlement, approaches, pedagogies, and all sorts of issues that schools are sort of battling with or trying to come to terms with. But I'm very optimistic, actually. It's not just words. And perhaps I ought to just say that all this work is being research driven. So it's got an empirical base to it. And that's the way we're going, really. It's objective, it's empirical based, it's well-founded actually in what people actually want, and justified by explaining to people why it's relevant today, and how we can make an exciting and worthwhile and relevant subject.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah. If I can just as follow-up point on that, that's really helpful to hear that, and really encouraging. It's just that if I imagine me going into school now as a young person, although I'm not that far away from then, the picture in my
I can see that by the length of your beard.
the picture in my mind is if I seen the word study English or study maths, I can conjure up what that could help me with going forwards. With RE, I don't have that same image, and I can't find in a sentence, a paragraph, or a place which says, here it is, this is what it does, both in terms of where it could lead you as a person, from a work point of view, but also from a person point of view. And I'm just wondering whether all what we've described helps the person at the end of the day, the young person, understand that golden thread all the way through.
There is, I can assure you, but Amanda wants to say something.
Yeah, Amanda, do you want to?
Yeah, I know where Gerda is implying that actually there's, you know, unfortunately, I understand that 50% of all teachers do not have any RE, because unfortunately when Michael Gove did the 8-point score, he took on the EBAC, he took RE out of that. So schools still, until they change, the government changed that, unfortunately I can't see that RE is actually going to have the greater importance than it does at the moment, because of this target-driven kind of culture we're in, where actually schools need to be at the top of the league tables, they need to have the best 8-point scores, they need the best EBAC scores, where actually it's not necessarily about that. And there's lots of teachers within the RE forums going, actually, what careers and everything does it lead to? Well, actually, it doesn't necessarily lead to one career. It's the basis of lots of different careers and life choices and what you do in life and how you see life. And there was actually a very good infographic that NatTrade did. So I think once we change, they've got to get to the heart of government and change the heart of government and their thinking about this subject. And then I think the change will also happen, but they've got to make inroads there into the DfE.
Thank you, Amanda. Andrew, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just a question to James, which reflects to some extent on what Amanda said. At this conference, was there much discussion about political influence? So you talked about legal influences and such like. It occurs to me that from, what was it, the Clark Commission, which is now 3 years ago, things seem to have gone backwards. Is that just my sense of what Clark was recommending? The Commission on Religious Education, which I think Peter knows a lot more about than I do.
Yeah, all I can say is
I'll take Peter afterwards.
Oh, sorry. Whereas the, I think Ofsted is very clearly an aspect or an agency of government. I would say that Ofsted is extremely pro-RE. And you've got nothing to worry about there, actually. RE, as I say, is receiving a great deal of attention and is properly resourced from government. And one of the questions, of course, we've just been talking about is how our local councils are also resourcing this Sacre and the work that we do. So one of the things that we must do as a Sacre is to try and persuade the council, and it's just one body within our reach, that we are worthwhile investing in. In fact, that there is a legal requirement for us to invest in, and that what we do is extremely valuable. And so, if I can just go back to Gurdiv, I mean, one of the explanations or the definitions, I think, for RE that I've heard today, in fact, which you might want to catch on to, is something about what it is to be fully human in a modern day society. So that's something that other subjects aren't approaching from a subject point of view, but it can be a focus for religious education. What it is to be fully human, living in a modern society, okay, and that again is something that I think when we are thinking about developing a new syllabus, agreed syllabus, these are the sorts of questions that will come up, the purpose, the definition, and that sort of thing, and that we as a Sacre can get behind. And that's part of our role, I think, to publicise this and get schools interested. Sorry, thank you, Rosemary.
No, thank you very much, James, for that. I would just say, I think, as far as I can see, Rutland County Council is fully supportive of Sacre. I did mention at our full council meeting last night that I had been to the conference, and there's certainly something maybe to raise a bit more profile amongst the other members of the council, which we'll try and do. I'll take Peter now, and then Lucy, and then we have got a sort of debate issue further down in the agenda. So take you two first, and then we'll move on with the agenda. Thank you. Peter.
I want to say that there is no and never has been an agreed definition of RE. And I'll take up that point in the discussion that you mentioned later under item 11.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
and,
thank you.
Also give some explanation about Andrew's mentioning of the Clark report and how that relates to this question of movement from teaching of religion, particularly Christianity, to make a Christian society, to moving towards a post-Enlightenment view that it should be a subject, such as physics as a subject, mathematics as a subject, based upon a particular concept called worldview. And I'll say a bit more about all that in this discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Lucy.
I think my comment will tie in nicely with item 11, which I was interested to know if the actual name of the subject came up at the conference, because again, that's something that I felt quite passionately about, the actual name religious education, but I think that will work under item 11. Yeah. The second comment I was going to make was about Ofsted. It's really good that they sound invested. Once I've read inspection reports that mention RE specifically, I will be happy with the proof being in the pudding, because I haven't read an Ofsted report for a bit, Rosemary, so I could be barking off the wrong tree. The last lot I read, there weren't actually specific references to the subject.
Okay, no, valid point. Thank you. Okay, yeah, we'll move to item 6, annual report 2020-21. It gets a bit confusing with the years. We obviously finalised the 1920 one, which went up to March 2020, and agreed last time to progress on the 2021 one. I need to put my hands up. I realised at quite a late stage that I hadn't got a previous Word document that I could work on. So Joe has kindly sent that to me. Having looked at the conference, and other people can maybe correct me on this, my thinking was in a way that actually it might be beneficial to change that reporting to do it on the academic year, so that the results are quite fresh when we actually, so we then publish the report in early autumn. I know this year and last year are going to be not the same, but it seemed to me an opportunity, as particularly as obviously this year's report is going to be quite thin as well, to just extend it to the end of August. So it's still 2021, but it's an 18-month period. I didn't know if anyone had got any. At the conference, they were talking about trying to standardize it a bit, but seeking further clarification. I think that might be for a while. I didn't know if anyone got any particular thoughts about that, or you're not really bothered. Is anyone? Lucy?
Fully supportive of your suggestion, Chair.
Thank you. Is that so? Lets me off the hook for another few months. Is that okay with everyone? So we will do a 2021 report, but it will go to end of August. Okay, but I will start working on it now. The development plan, it's just a standard item in the agenda that we have. I don't think there's anything specifically to comment on, unless anyone has got any particular comments. It is this discussion on the view. I think we had world views in there, which we're going to cover, and the continuing monitoring and evaluation. And I'll look to update probably in the next few months before our next meeting. I'll have a look to see where that needs an update, but it did extend through to 2022. Has anyone got any questions or comments on that? No? James, I obviously can't see you, but if you have anything, just say or put up your virtual hand.
Yeah, I will do.
Okay, thank you. Item number 8 on the agenda, Ofsted report, the highlights from Amanda on the recent Ofsted report, which you've got a link to on the papers.
Do you want me to share the PowerPoint?
That would be really useful.
Can you let me share? Whoever owns the site.
Joe, can you do that?
Do you want me to share it from my screen?
Yeah. Can I share it? Because then I can go through it at my page.
You should be able to, under your screen, see a green box that says.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yeah.
So brilliant. I'm getting so much better at this. Okay. Right. We've already alluded to and said about Ofsted. It was really nice to see this report out there, and actually that Ofsted have actually understood that RE needs to be taken seriously. The last report they did in 2013, actually my school, I was then teaching in Leicester, and my school was actually inspected as part of that report. So I kind of have an understanding of what goes on when they do a whole report on this, and they do a whole report on this. Okay, you saw it, and that's the link to it. And actually, there is a very good review. The front of it, there was the beauty of these reports is actually on the front page, they do a really good summary of the main points without having to go into, I think it's about 50 pages on there. So the front page does do something. It does actually do a really, really good report. The big thing that came out of it on the front of that is this. This is what I've been showing my teachers, is be aware that in the spring of 2022, they'll be publishing a report on the quality of RE curriculums taught in schools. We will gather the evidence for this through subject deep dives during inspections under the framework. So that's going to be section 5s and section 8s, where they go in. And my gut feeling and talking to other people is actually this is not going to be the Ofsted where it's not going to be their schools are allowed to just actually say, well, actually, yes, we'd like to show you our RE. This is where Ofsted are going to say, okay, show us your curriculum. What are you doing on RE? This is the ones that we're going to pick. which is good, because hopefully that way they're going to see a range of different curriculum. And as far as I'm aware, they have already started to do this, and they have started to do some of the deep dives into this when they've been going in. So schools really, and I think it's going to take some of our schools on very unawares. You know, can't be complacent over this, because actually they want to know what's going on as well. So these are kind of like the big kind of things which came out of it. It should be grounded in academic study. So really what this is saying is it shouldn't be just kind of this airy-fairy view, or this is what some believe. It actually needs to be grounded in proper academic theory. So if I put my historian's hat on, because I'm actually background as a history teacher, I would think about revisionist arguments, Marxist arguments in history, and this is the kind of arguments they need to start looking at, this academic grounding in RE. So they really know their personal knowledge, that the children have actually really good knowledge of the different religions and different concepts of religions, that we don't just actually assume that everybody, just because you're a Muslim, doesn't mean to say you're all the same. Okay, we need to have a look into that, and that our pupils also are allowed to actually challenge ideas, and actually hopefully it will also challenge their prior knowledge as well. So they actually have, and this is going to be the problem with only 50% of some of our teachers only having up to GCSE, let alone A level, in anything to do surrounding RE. And I think this is where our schools have let down some of our children. It used to be that when I was teaching, that actually in years 10 and 11, all our pupils would do a half GCSE. And so they came out with a very good knowledge, and actually they had a good grounding in RE. Cover content collectively enough rather than superficially. There should be substantive content, rather than simply covering excessive amounts of content superficially. So really thinking about what knowledge do you want the children, your pupils and the children to know, and actually covering it well. Not just saying, oh, we're going to do festivals and we're going to do 17 different festivals. They're not going to remember or know anything. It might be that actually just cover perhaps 3. I'm just thinking primary as such at the moment. Actually, and you do them well, and you actually begin to actually understand how they perhaps actually come in together. It's a bit like I would always suggest that actually in the autumn term that you look at Diwali, perhaps look at Diwali, Hanukkah, and or Sukkot or Christmas, and you bring them together to understand actually why do people have festivals and what are they about. They should allow children to have, our pupils to have a bigger grasp of the picture and the place of religion and non-religion in the world. I think this goes back to what Peter said, of actually we're not there to teach children about a religion, or actually because that is the religion of the country. It's to actually teach about religions in the world. Actually, how does this affect our world? How does it affect our life? And how does it how do we get away from these misconceptions? And this is going to be some of the issues that we have going forward with RE, perhaps. It needs to be well sequenced. This is where perhaps some of our secondary schools and our primary schools are going to have to perhaps start talking and working together. And it's perhaps something, actually I need to have a meeting with Lizzie, that we need to work out some strategies for this. Because we need to have really good, well-sequenced lessons. So what you teach in Key Stage 1, pupils, children need to come back to in Key Stage 2. They need to actually have that grasp of that sequence of lessons. Also thinking about how you teach it. Do we just go straight in and teach? There's a body of thought which now says actually we should be teaching Judaism first, because you can't understand what happens within Jesus and Christianity if you don't understand Judaism. And then after Christianity, you teach Islam, because it's the order it comes out of, and there's an effect, like a knock-on effect. That doesn't always go down well with some teachers and some schools, because they think that's wrong. But actually, you can't understand, the Last Supper without understanding Passover. There's a huge connection there between them. So you need to have that sequencing and that basis of understanding. And this is where actually and this also comes back down to that academic grounding. So a lot of this comes in together. They need to know the ways of knowing. How do we know these things? How do we actually access it? How do you access religion? How do we know what is there? How do we actually interpret religious texts? Unless we actually tell children how they're done and we actually look at it. We go, well, because we want to get away from that stereotyping. So it might be actually looking at the Bible and actually understanding that actually that different people actually interpret it in different ways. And this is where the academic grounding comes out, and we then don't have that oversimplification, and we get away from that stereotypes, and it makes it a really good academic subject. They should not be assessments should not be onerous, and I thought this was so good of Ofsted, because we don't want masses of writing where actually you have some heads that say we have to have a piece of writing for everything. We have to have a massive amount of assessment. It should be a really good mix of assessment, and assessment can come in, especially in RE, can come in all sorts of different ways. And it's something I've been looking at with some of my teachers for a long time. So actually, it's about identifying the gaps, not just testing them on what they know, to make sure they've learned it all. And this is a really important one, that sufficient time has to be allocated to RE. And it's at secondary level, they pointed out it may be delivered through tutor times or rotation with other subjects. But if you're a tutor of maths, do you have a really good, do you understand what RE is? You know, not all teachers are, not all teachers have no understanding of actually how to deliver it, and actually then how to cope with the questions which sometimes come out of it, because children and pupils have all sorts of questions and things that they want to know about. So it's thinking about where and when and who teaches is really important. But that also means actually we need more specialists in RA. So I'm saying actually that it's actually, again, I hate doing this on teachers, but they need to kind of review their curriculum, begin to review their curriculum. Are we meeting the expectations of Ofsted? Is it actually really good and strong? Is your curriculum suitable for your pupils? Or are you just following a curriculum for the sake of it because everything's been given to you, or you've been told to follow it by your academy trust? And I think that actually teachers and heads have got to start questioning some of this. Right, that's a very quick overview of it. So there you go. And any questions?
Thank you, Amanda. No, it's encouraging though, isn't it? All those sort of thoughts from Ofsted, and presumably you're, as you said, you're getting that message out to schools as well.
Yes, and I've been I will do. I need to speak to Lizzie. We need Lizzie and I. Hopefully, I will get hold of you, Lizzie, and put some date in the diary before the end of term. Of actually, we need a strategy with Rutland schools, of getting to Rutland schools and saying, look, you've got to take this seriously, and you've got to actually and actually think about this. The secondaries on looking at their websites they don't seem to be quite so that they actually have quite good curriculums. I think what they do need to concentrate on is actually those who don't take the GCSE and the allocation for RE for those who don't take it. And I'm just beginning to really look into the half GCSE.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Just a question for Amanda. Amanda, was there anything there that's a surprise?
No, to be honest, and I think the surprise was about the assessment. That they really said you should not, you know, and Lizzie's not nodding her head, but you've got, so, you know, we're still stuck down this thing that we have to have lots and lots and lots of assessments. We have to assess. And you don't. If you have really good assessment in the class, if you have really good activities in the class, if you have really good questions, things for the children to actually, and the pupils to aim for in the class, assessment should come out. And I've kind of been saying about sequencing for a while. We really need to think about the sequencing of actually our lessons. You can't just.
If I could just come with a follow-up. Sorry, James, if I may just come in with a follow-up on that. So I agree. From what you said, it's really succinct that it's all there in one place and it's got Ofsted's weight to it, but there wasn't any surprises. And if I just strip it out, if you take the fact that they're identifying a shortfall in time allocation, a question around capacity and capabilities sort of linked to that, and an overburden of paperwork through assessment, it's almost no wonder we're not as far forward as we would like to be.
You know, you're right, it isn't, and this is why I think actually heads have now got to start looking at this and spend time looking at and developing and understanding where, and actually contacting, especially secondaries, contacting the secondary schools where they actually do allocate, actually where they do teach RE from everybody from key stage from year 7 to year 11 does RE, and they do the half GCSE. And if there are any schools in Rutland, I can put them into contact with schools. There's certainly, and they're not just, these aren't just faith schools either. There are community or academies within Cambridgeshire who do take the whole 200 year group through a GCSE and do the half GCSE. So it's actually done. And then the other part on the Sacre, and I went to the other part of the conference, they did an eve twilight session on it, is actually the link between pupils taking GCSE and gaining extra grades, and the grade difference in their GCSEs. It's almost it can be 2 points, almost 2 points on their GCSEs. So that is that correlation. It's always been in the back of my mind. You can see that actually when schools do take the whole cohort through.
Thank you. James, did you have a question?
I just wanted to respond again to Gurdjieff and just to say that in my experience, a lot of what has just been reported on is actually finding its way into schools. When you look at some good examples of school curriculum for RE, as it were, or school plans for RE, teaching RE, you will see there is an approach which is much more academically grounded. You will see that there's an approach that's based on ways of knowledge, so that schools are looking at the question, how do you know this? And so there may be different sources of knowledge that children will begin to engage with. Some schools are using the 3 points or areas of knowledge, so that's theology, philosophy, and social sciences. And so some schools are starting now to develop their plans to include ways of knowledge. How do you know? They're also looking at content and how to approach content that is not teaching people to believe, but teaching them what it means to believe, which is, I think, very good as well. So that's content. And there's this question about breadth and depth and how much content is going on at the moment. Sequencing also has always been a perennial thing in schools, is to plan a sequence from early years all the way through education so that children have the right skills and knowledge to be able to move on to the next stage. And they're also thinking about what skills do children need in religious education. And those skills are not necessarily the skills that you might find in mathematics or in art and geography or science and stuff like that. They're a different set of skills. Some of these skills might be to be able to engage in an argument, to form an argument, to be able to articulate how one feels about something. These are different skills in very many ways. And of course, assessment, there are different ways of assessing children. And it's not necessarily a substantive assessment which is required. It could be the way children engage, how children may be able to articulate something, their contribution to something. That also could be a way of assessing children from time to time. So this is a subject that actually has a great deal of depth and requires a great deal of sensitivity and knowledge about, which is what we're starting to understand, I think, ourselves at this moment in time.
Thank you. No, I think that's we could probably have a whole day discussing this. Lucy, and then.
Thank you, Rosemary. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's brilliant to see observations about time spent teaching RE, and I think it's really, really encouraging. The only thing I'm finding a bit odd, and this might be because I'm now getting old, I find ways of knowing quite a cumbersome thing, because for me, at the beginning of the meeting, we were discussing about people understanding the value of RE, being able to see it as an academic subject. So I find it a bit odd that Ofsted haven't used phrases such as research skills, critical thinking skills, chronology, because actually those cross-pollinate across all your academic studies. So it then grounds it in academic language, rather than, I have to admit, Rosemary, and perhaps I've been fuddled by bridges and verges, but I had to really think, what do they mean, ways of knowing? What do they mean? Whereas if, I don't know, I just feel that would be perhaps helpful for that cross-pollination across academia.
Oh, I would agree. Amanda, do you want to come back quickly on that?
Yes, only because I had a secondary hub meeting in Cambridgeshire last week, and one of the schools there, it was brilliant. Actually, they're beginning to look at year 7. Actually, and then what they mean by ways of knowing is actually how they're looking at it, because, and this worldviews idea as well, of actually how do I get my information, how do I make sense of the world to me. So they're going kind of back to basics at the beginning of year 7 and actually questioning, how do they know actually what's being told to them, how do they know that's correct, where's all this information coming from, and then going forward and taking that skill of questioning, of looking, which you need, and actually and thinking objectively in a different way, and they're beginning to look at it. They've seen it like that. They questioned it as well, of what do they actually mean by that. And I thought that was quite a nice way of going forward, of actually, and they're beginning to unpick a lot about what is going on. Where do I get this information from?
Yeah, I'm sure
I'd still call that research skills, but that's me being just old and middle-aged now.
Same as me.
Okay, thank you. Peter, if you can be quite quick, and then I would want to make sure we've left enough room for the rest of the agenda.
It's what academic philosophers call epistemology.
What? Say that again?
Academic philosophers and theologians call epistemology.
Epistemology. Oh.
Subject of knowledge. I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Okay, thank you. Right, we're learning. I'm learning things today. No, thanks, Amanda. That was yeah, that's interesting. No, and we'll see what happens with if Ofsted are taking more sort of deep dives into RE as a subject and what that might mean for the schools in our area. Do you want to give us a quick update on the training and network meetings? I know you had to cancel one last week, didn't you?
I did, and again, I did. I only had two schools, and they're both Rutland Learning Trust, and just with 2 on Zoom, it makes it really hard work. I'm sorry. I find it's just me doing all the talking, and there's very little actually knowledge going out there. So I did actually end up having to do it. And what I do again, when I speak to Lizzie, we need to put a training program, and we need to go back, hopefully. Everything is going to open up again, fingers crossed, that we can actually get back into schools, because I think actually Rutland schools do seem to like it better if you meet face to face.
Yeah.
They haven't necessarily coped, I get the feeling, very well by Zoom and doing things.
Yeah, I think that would be really good if there is a training program. And I know, although it didn't happen, it would be useful, I think, for members of the Sacre to actually know when those meetings are, in case anyone wants to.
Yeah, I'm going to put those down.
Yeah, a training program for the whole year, I think, would be good.
My first training actually in Cambridge and Peterborough is actually Ofsted and deep dives, and it might be something which we can replicate for our Rutland schools in RE. So I think that's the very first one I'm doing in the beginning of October.
Thank you. Lucy, have you still got your hand up, or is that a legacy?
No, it's a legacy hand. Oh. I do apologise.
That's all right. You can leave it up if you like.
Oh, I'm going to lower it forthwith. I feel I've overused it.
Change it into a smiley face or something. Okay, thank you. Item 10, that's Lizzie, in terms of where we're at with monitoring. Again, a difficult year, so many pressures on schools, and
I have got some feedback though, so that's good to share.
oh, excellent.
Like we discussed before, we spoke about actually asking schools where they thought things, where things were going really well and if they needed any more support from us. So we did have, we got 9 schools did reply, so not too bad.
Oh, that's good.
They said they feel like actually it's become firmly embedded within their schools, because what they've done, they've taken all the best resources that were available and created their own schemes. So that's the Rutland Learning Trust. And they pulled together Understanding Christianity, the new Peterborough Diocese scheme, as well as keeping some of the best units from the old scheme as well. So they've been drawing all their resources to create their own. The units have a Christianity majority with the opportunity to learn about and compare with others world faiths in term 3. And what they've done, they've had flexibility with, obviously with school closure, when they couldn't be face-to-face learning, they've jiggled the units around a bit to catch up. And they've made adjustments because some of the schools are so small that they've got, say, 3 year groups in one class. So then that's quite challenging where they've got the mixed ages to be able to kind of cross all of the activities together and to pitch it for 3 different year groups at the same time. And they have planned an event for the next academic year where they will have a multi-faith event in year 6, and that's planned for term 3. They felt that it's been nice that the fact that Christianity is a world faith along with all the other world religions, and they feel that children often see in their schools Christianity as a white British religion, and we wanted to quash that idea. That's what they said. They wanted to quash that idea, and they wanted the views of all faiths across the world reflected in what they teach. Another school have said that they've got a clear big picture for teaching religion and worldviews, and that creates a clear curriculum map across their school, and they've got clear outcomes and key vocabulary for each unit of work. And then this is a rolling programme due to the mixed age classes as well. They cover multiple religions in their school, and they do teach every week. So it's a weekly talk class of RE. They would like some support in recommended places to visit and visitors to come into their school to help with the teaching. And they really want support with planning for challenge. So they want to know how they can adapt their curriculum to really challenge children as well. So they welcome lots of support within their schools of things that we can help with.
Okay. No, that's great. And so that support that they're identified and asking for, is that something that you can provide?
Yeah, we can do that through the network meetings. We can cover. Yeah.
Okay, so how many? That was 9 schools in total.
9 schools, yeah. And also we've had a request from Oakham Primary School about someone who would like to join Sacre as well, if that is possible.
You want to send details to governance, because one of the things I need to do is actually just look at the where we are with the membership of Sacre as well, because I'm aware that some people can't necessarily make meetings, and just a bit of a stock take, I think, on making sure we've got adequate representatives, etc. So that probably the next meeting at the start of the next would be a good opportunity. So if you would like to send the details to Joe, because there was someone actually who was at the conference who also expressed an interest. So we'll take that on board when we review that at the next meeting. Is that okay, Joe? Yeah, okay. James has got his hand up.
Oh, just a quick one, Lizzie. Just wondering, how many schools is that out of? So that's 9 out of how many?
The 17 primaries that responded, yeah.
Thank you so much. Which sort of just puts it into perspective, doesn't it?
So did you ask secondaries as well?
Yeah, we asked all schools, but it was just a case of who responded because they're very busy.
Good. If
Just volunteering that if Liz, if you need anything from the Sikh community, either place to visit or somebody come in or online, just let me know.
oh,
That's
that's
great, thank you.
James, have you still got your hand up or not?
I have actually, and this is actually moving away from the subject, but something I just thought of when Lizzie was talking about a number of people who responded to her survey. I'm just wondering very, very briefly whether you discovered that schools are under a tremendous stress and pressure at the moment because of COVID or exceptional circumstances.
Yeah, I think we've had kind of a rise in COVID cases within the last month as well. So we've got a lot of year groups self-isolating. So I know there's, been a few concerns over the pressures. And I think at the moment the schools are being asked for multiple things all the time. And I think that's quite a challenge. But they are very open to working with Sacre and want as much support as they can have. So they are very
Engaged.
Mm.
Amanda?
Yeah, it's just, it'll be nice to see those kind of schools at the network meetings. And I think that's the thing, they want to be engaged, but we're offering network meetings which are very tailored to what's being, what was going to happen this time, because this last week's was about actually what knowledge and actually what pupils need to know, and discussing that and the Ofsted. Also, I do have a list of visits and visitors, actually websites and everything, which we could send out from Peterborough and Cambridgeshire as well. I'm sure everybody from that area will be willing to help as much as possible.
Thank you.
Amanda, presumably you followed up why people haven't come to, I'm assuming it's pressure of work and other things, but are there any specific reasons why they sort of value network meetings but just can't make it, or don't think they're relevant? Is there anything you're picking up?
The two that were coming was Sally from one of the schools I know, and she comes quite regularly on the other schools. I don't know. I think actually, Lizzie, you were saying that it's been quite low across for all kind of training and things.
Yeah,
I think it's just so tired and so overwhelmed by everything at the moment that I think they just want, I think that by the time the end of the day comes, they just want to go home.
Yeah, I think it's all our numbers have been quite low across training in all subject areas, so it's not just this subject. I think they're just ready to come back fighting in the next academic year.
Yeah, okay, well, let's go for the programme from then. Okay, has anyone else got any other questions before we move on to item 11? So this is about we talked last time that we need to start planning in plenty of time for an agreed syllabus from September 23. So, and then we also did want to have a bit more of a detailed discussion on the worldviews. So Amanda, do you want to take us through what we need to do as the next steps to start that planning, to make sure that we do things in time and in the right way for Rutland on that agreed syllabus?
I was going to share this with you, that one. Hopefully, I think it did go out in the pack. I sent it over last week. Is the kind of the options of what we could do with the syllabus, and they're only options at the moment because and I'll go through those first. Option one is just to review the current syllabus, update any areas that need to be updated. But the basic outline stays certainly the same, and it's free of charge for the end user. I don't personally think that is one option. It is an option out there. There is a fourth option. I will go on. I should have put it on here. I don't think that actually focuses on necessarily Ofsted, what Ofsted wants and the future of worldviews. I think our syllabus is very open, and when we wrote it, it is good. It doesn't need masses of work on it. Option two is to review the current syllabus, update and align, and add more resources and curriculum information to reflect the new Ofsted report and the changing views on RE in our schools, religions and worldviews, free of charge for the end user. That's okay. It's not masses of work. it is work, but it isn't matters, and it's updating things and adding a bit more. Whether schools would use it. The option 3 is update the statutory guidelines in line with the new Ofsted reports and reports from the RE Council. Totally overhaul most of the non-statutory elements to the syllabus with more curriculum ideas, resources and other materials. This will be accessed through a portal at a cost depending on what level of syllabus the school requires. This is costly as materials will have to be written and money will we need to negotiate with each council. And it's also costly because actually materials need to be excellent. They need to be really high quality materials. Option 4 is actually you could buy in an agreed syllabus from RE Today, NatTray and places like that. The problem with those is they're costly. And actually, as somebody who works for one of the other Sacres found out from talking at the Sacre conference, once you have one of those agreed syllabuses, you can't change it and you can't actually change what is written because the people who wrote it, so RE Today, or whoever, actually owns the copyright. So it's as it is, and as things change, you can't update and change it. So it's an agreement on what we want and what negotiating we want. Talking to Peterborough, because we had Peterborough's Sacre just under 2 weeks ago, they have suggested that we get together, and Gurdjieff's going to sit on this for Peterborough, and I'd just like one person, if possible, from Rutland, if you agree, that we're going to do some costings on the 3rd option. I'm going to get hold of Norfolk, because Norfolk Sacre have done a really good syllabus. You can't see it because it's on a portal, and I'm going to ask them and inquire how much it actually costs. And what we're suggesting to do is just a little group get together, perhaps once or twice over the summer break, and work out some costings on how much it will cost to do a really excellent syllabus. Because we have got schools who are going off and buying resources from companies or using resources which are not necessarily very up to date and giving money elsewhere, but perhaps actually that money should come back to Sacre and what we produce. But that means actually having to perhaps pay for teachers to come off, pay the cover for teachers to come and work on these things, and because I can't do it all on the hours that I do it all, and we need different viewpoints and different ideas on this. So this is why it's in a way starting it in September that we pull together a conference in September. The other suggestion is actually if we are going to work as a 3, so that's with Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, is that actually we need to get, if an agreed syllabus conference is called, that a constitution is put together about actually how much work each Sacre is going to put in, that it should be kind of equal and it's not just some people doing all the work. Any questions?
Okay, can I just clarify, Amanda, the current state of play on our agreed syllabus, is that Rutland's is not, who's got the copyright to that?
It's copyright between it. Well, it was jointly put together by Northamptonshire, Rutland, Cambridgeshire, and Peterborough. So it's a joint.
Okay.
So and I would assume nobody's ever actually thought about that. We didn't. Gurdjieff, we didn't ask Gurdjieff. Actually, we didn't actually think about that at the time, did we?
Just for clarification. So if we were talking about updating that, all those parties would be involved again.
Yes, they're all quite happy to work together. It's felt it's good to work together because actually you can draw on more people, more expertise together, and it kind of, and actually more teachers across areas as well.
Okay, so we're talking about that same group of authorities doing a revised syllabus, whether it is whatever one of those options is. We're still talking about the same parties. We're not talking about any additional or any opting out of that, because we do have to have a sort of conference, inverted commas, don't we, to agree?
Yes, we do. The only ones I have is what you would like to do about Northamptonshire. My kind of what I have been told, because I was the advisor for Northamptonshire until the contract ended and it was decided to pull out for various things that are happening in Northamptonshire, and I live in Northamptonshire as well, that actually it's not, and I'm being told that actually the Sacre in Northamptonshire is not functioning very well, and there's no advisor. Apologies, that's my dog. Shh. Sorry.
Okay, so it's Rutland, Peterborough, Northamptonshire, Cambridgeshire at the moment. Yeah, the 4.
Yes, the dog stopped barking now. Sorry about it.
But Northamptonshire, you're not sure whether they
Well,
want.
it's whether you would like me to approach them, and it's whether I need to speak to my line manager. I've got a meeting coming up with my line manager, because it's also a contract will have to be negotiated with Northamptonshire to pay for my time, and it's whether it's worth doing that and whether they're willing to do that.
Okay, so in terms of the cost of it, then the costs would be shared between those.
Yes, yes. Oh yeah, yeah. All the costs we say. Hence why, if we have an agreed syllabus, the conference is called, it's putting together a terms of reference, a constitution to put that into actually that everybody has an equal say and puts equal amount of work in it, and then the costs are all then equal.
Okay. Okay, so what you're suggesting as one of the steps is to look at what, in terms of doing a thorough not rewrite, but just a different, overhaul, is that you're going to look at the actual costs of doing that?
Yes.
The other authorities?
Yes, I'm going to do it. So hopefully, and it's just getting together. All we want to do is actually somebody from, so Gerdib's going to represent Peterborough, because obviously he sits on Peterborough, and we're going to, it would be nice if somebody from Rutland would just join us, and then I will get somebody from Cambridgeshire. I'll speak to Cambridgeshire, if that's Cambridgeshire, and we just do a rough, so we can actually just work out how much it would cost to do a really super duper all singing, all dancing agreed syllabus. So we've got those costings to go forward, to go to the relevant people in the councils and work it out from then. Or do we need to go to option 2 because the funding is not going to be available? So it's working out the initial kind of costings and the initial thoughts on this.
Okay, any comments from anybody else at the moment? James?
Yeah, hello again. I've been listening to people talking about this just recently, and one of the things that I was quite impressed about was that a survey was done asking all the schools what they liked about the current agreed syllabus, where they felt there were perhaps gaps, how it could be improved, and what they'd like to see in it. And I'm just wondering whether our Sacre here, Rutland Sacre, would think that was a worthwhile exercise to do before we really engaged, as a precursor, really. That was my first thought. And the second thought was I liked the option 2, because actually that looks like updating. It talks about Ofsted report, which is always important. But of course, there are other organisations, authorities from which we are learning about RE. And I like the second phrase there, changing views on RE, which seems to me to be quite, worthwhile trying to include in the next agreed syllabus, such as religions and worldviews. So something about that as well. So that's why I like option 2.
Okay, thank you. Has anyone? Amanda, do you want to?
Yeah, that was hopefully what I was going to do last week at the network meeting, was to actually ask Rutland schools what they think. I've got a network meeting actually tomorrow with schools in Peterborough and Cambridgeshire, and so that is actually going to be a bit of the meeting. I'm going to take about 15 minutes of the meeting to actually ask them what they think. And I do have my last training session I did about 4 weeks ago. I had about 20 schools come across that, and they've actually all agreed to do a small survey for me about what they want from an agreed syllabus, what they feel they need, a bit like Lizzie has done already. And they've got that agreed, so that is in process, and that will be available at the next, all that information coming from different areas will be available for Sacre to see by the next meeting. And when we need to actually agree and vote, because we will need to be core for the next meeting to vote, because it's something you do have to vote on.
Okay, so sorry, before Lucy, are you So you're doing that for the other authorities? Are you
I
proposing?
am, and I am, yes. So we can at least find that out. So we will have some information there from that. And if I can get the network meeting in mid-September, perhaps for the first one for Rutland, we could have all that information from all the areas there for the next meeting.
So you'd include Rutland in that?
Oh yeah, it's important. Yeah, I want to know.
Do we not need to sort of extra reach out to the people, the schools that we're not in, because it's as much why they don't use it, isn't it, as well?
They do, the only ones who have to use the agreed syllabus are our community schools, our LA schools, and our VC schools.
Yeah.
Academies can use any syllabus. They're advised to use the locally agreed one, and they're advised to do that. But if they want to go and buy into Norfolk, they can. And we have to the difference between a syllabus and a resource pack. So often they will go and buy something like Discovery RE. That's not a syllabus, that's a resource pack. And our schools have also got to remember that still you can buy a resources in, but you still have got to tailor that RE for the needs of your pupils.
Yeah.
So if you've got pupils who are really very monocultural, you need to tailor your RE to actually make sure actually that is addressed in your RE as well.
Lucy, did you want to say something before?
Yeah, miserable budget person here. Option 2 immediately stands out as the one that is affordable, and I have added miserable here because I can't. Anyway, option 3, I think again, in terms of ballpark figures and actually whether that is affordable within the other pressures within our education budget, Lizzie will probably know better, but then as a subset with that demonstrates why it's so important that we get our schools delivering on that Ofsted guidance, because actually you're then building up an evidence base of need, an evidence base of value. If I had a magic wand and a money tree, option 3 sings to me. But with my budget head on, I'm looking at option 2 and thinking, oh, how very splendid that looks like. And I'm not sure, obviously, that's the best solution for RE, but the evidence base will be really important.
Option 3 is actually because it's done on the portal, there is a cost to the schools to use it. So you will claim back some of that, and actually you can then actually sell that out to other areas as well. There is the option of selling that out to other areas. The PSHE team in Cambridge should do this and have been doing this for a while, and they are going to be another source of where I'm going to go and have a look as to how they do that and how they manage it.
Okay, James.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really pleased that we're talking about evidence-based actions here, and but yeah, I was just wondering whether we could perhaps have an agenda item at our next Sacre meeting where we can have a good discussion about the evidence that Amanda is going to produce from her survey, and then we can we'll learn quite a lot, actually, I think, about what schools think of the current agreed syllabus, and that will be really good to know.
Okay, so, but Amanda, alongside that, what exactly did you want? You're exploring anyway, option 3 costs, regardless of Rutland.
Yes, it is. Oh, yes, well, we're doing that actually. It was agreed with that on Peterborough that we do need to have a look at the costs, and it needs to be costing of actually. I'm going to a couple of the other Sacres around the country, like Norfolk, and asking them, could they just give us a ballpark figure of actually how much and how long it took and what they did, if they could just actually give us some information. Most Sacres are really good at actually doing that. But actually, we've just agreed that if we had probably just one person from each area, we could just divide it very quickly and find that information and come back and draw a conclusion very quickly, probably in a couple of meetings. That was right, wasn't it, Gurdiv?
Correct, yes. Can I say option 2 may also cost a little bit? But
I was going to say, we do need a budget for option 2.
Yep.
And option 1.
And option 1, yeah.
This was just saying, these are the approaches. Shall we go away, collect some costs, bring it back, and in line with what James said, clarifying the need and the strengths and weaknesses?
Yeah, I think that's what we would need for this certainly I would suggest that's what we need for this Sacre. We need, without, you know, hours and hours of work involved in that, but to do some costings, some options, and based on, you know, feedback from schools as well. Is that feasible for the next meeting, Amanda?
Yes, I can do the feedback from schools. I can get the feedbacks. It's just actually just having somebody just have a very quick probably Zoom meeting or Teams meeting at some point at the end of next week to say actually just work out actually which Sacres we're going to approach, and perhaps one person approaches each Sacre, gets the information, and then meet perhaps early September with that information and work out actually the kind of the costings. What are the costings, actually the ballpark figure of actually how much this is going to cost.
Okay, sorry, I'm not clear what you want from a member of this Sacre.
You actually had to take some of the burden off actually so actually they can actually perhaps talk and engage with just one Sacre to find that information out. I can engage with another one, Gerda can engage with another one.
To find out the costs, because
yes, we can. Yeah.
For us it's a council cost, so it's, you know, members of the Sacre who aren't actually working for the council and have got no insight into that.
They should do. They've done an agreed syllabus, and they have had a new agreed syllabus recently. They will know the cost of actually of how much it's cost to do that agreed syllabus in a way which actually gives a whole package of actually resources and materials, and how much and how much they actually charge each school for that.
We did it.
Is that information we need?
From where, sorry?
Well, Norfolk, I know Norfolk have just done this. Hampshire.
The ones who've done it recently.
Yes, Hampshire.
Oh, I see. Okay, right. So we're going out to other Sacres.
Yeah, and
to
just
ask specific questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so have you got a list of the ones that need to be consulted?
This is why I'd like to have a meeting with, kind of like a quick Zoom meeting with them, so we can actually, like with Gerda.
Okay, and the specific questions to ask, because a lot will be in that, what questions you actually ask.
Yeah.
Okay, so you want someone from this Sacre to feed into that meeting?
Yes, please.
Okay, well, I'm quite happy to do that unless anyone else would like to do that, because Gerda's already busy doing that as well. Would anyone else like to? Lizzie, do you want to do that?
I'm happy to do that.
Okay, we'll let Lizzie do that then.
Thanks, Lizzie.
Okay, thank you.
Can I clarify then the output would be, once this sort of subgroup is formed, it will collect some benchmarking information on costs, update the options and present that back in addition to user feedback.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Yeah, okay. And if we can hopefully schedule that for our next meeting in October, that would be great. And then we can press on with those decisions.
Hence why we need to do it now, because actually, because time we then go back and we've got to go back and talk to each council and the different councils. It needs to agree to
but with the aim of having that report in October. Okay, thank you. Are we okay then to move on to world views? Is everyone all right? I don't think we have a set time for this meeting. I usually try and finish by 6, but I think we'll probably be going for 6:15. Is that okay with everybody?
Yep.
I may need to dash at 6 on account of feeding children.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. They do need feeding.
So I've heard.
Right, over to you, Peter.
Okay, thank you very much, Rosemary. Amanda brought before our committee a book by Mark Chater called Reforming RE and recommended that we have a look at it. James suggested somebody should read it and write some sort of notes about it. I agreed to do that, so that's where we are. Now, I speak on this subject, on this paper, as an academic theologian. So you'll have to forgive me if there are things which need a bit more explanation. The book is really discussing something called the Commission on Religious Education, which Andrew referred to earlier, the Clarke Commission. Clarke was the Dean of Westminster Abbey, and he was the chair of the commission. Now, there are 11 points that the commission made, which you will have had circulated to you, One of them, which I've highlighted in red on that report, was number 8, a legal amendment. The Commission suggested a legal amendment to Sacre's into local advisory networks for religion, not religions, religion and worldview, with a more inclusive composition and a wider remit of members. So out of the 11 suggestions from the Commission, that one seems to me to be the most significant to us. The others are significant, but not to our structuring. Going to the book is structured by 11 contributors writing essays. There are 14 chapters, and the first part of the book is rather dismal because it talks about the fall of RE. And I've taken one extract from the foreword of that part 1 of the book, which really sums up what the general sort of view is. And I quote it, most worrying situation, pupil entitlement. A quarter of secondary schools reported in 2018, that's at the Commission's time, that they provided no dedicated curriculum for the subject. So that's an estimated 800,000 pupils not receiving legal entitlement to learn about religion and worldview. Now, all the essayists in this book, the 11 contributors, generally agree with that's the state of play at the moment. So the part 1 is called The Fall of RE. They give 3 challenges in this part 1. They obviously want to, first of all, in the first challenge, address the failure to create a credible academic rationale. Now, we've talked this afternoon quite a lot, I think quite loosely, about what is an academic rationale. Well, I don't want to go into that at the moment, but that's a very significant point. What actually do you mean by academic study? And that has to do with the whole question of worldviews. And the second challenge, and I think I put that in red because I think this is for the Sacre particularly, liberate the subject from the political and economic control of belief communities and other producer interests. So there's a question here in Chater's essay book about changing the structure of Sacres to lessen the influence of some sections of the community, particularly the Church of England. Going quickly on to the second part of the book, which is rather more interesting, there are a variety of essays there about the rise of worldviews and a discussion about worldviews, which is, I think, what you actually want me to talk about. I said earlier on this afternoon that RE has no accepted definition because it has no divinity as a defined subject within the Enlightenment understanding of subjects. The history of it, of RE, the foundational history, as you probably know, is in the Butler Act of the Education Act of 1944. And that's where it all sort of begins in terms of these vague ideas about what it is. And I quote what it says, RE is about a measure of avowedly Christian stewardship advanced by a Christian minister, passed by a Christian parliament, directed toward the goal of creating a truly Christian population. 1944 Education Act. That's what RE was about and for. So that's where we start with this. Moving on to what do we mean by a worldview? We have to look, unfortunately, at the German idealists. I say unfortunately because they're fairly impenetrable. So we start with Immanuel Kant, whose dates are 1724 to 1804, who was credited with coining the word worldviews. I'll leave the German pronunciation to you, but I did write it down in the notes if you want it. And it's arguably, it is from the Berlin philosopher Wilhelm Dilthey that we derive the strongest roots of worldview. Now, what he thought was worldview was an epistemological concept. Now, I'll just stop there for a moment and just remind you that knowledge about everything really was based in our country, particularly under the 44 Act and before that, on what the church taught and what the state taught. They decided what was an opinion and what was knowledge. With Immanuel Kant said we ought to apply our reason to things and started the age of reason and told us we could know nothing about God. Now, the church obviously has some difficulty with that and hasn't really quite sorted that out yet, but not to worry about that at the moment. So that's epistemology that he's talking about. What can you know about things and how can you know it? He separated things into two things: the phenomena of things, which said you can know about the phenomena, how it approaches it, which we might loosely call, forgive me scientists for this, but we might loosely call scientific observation and detached reason. You say we can't know anything about God because that's something called the essence of God, the ontology. We don't know about that. So the history of this movement, which we're being part of this afternoon, I want to put into a wider context of history of ideas. We're moving from teaching RE to make a Christian nation to moving towards an Enlightenment view, which has already happened in the universities. You may notice that in the ancient universities, the center of the university is the chapel. That's not so in the newer universities. So that's already taken place there. This Enlightenment view of a subject being defined by its epistemology, what you can know through observation and detached reason. So I think that's the main thing that I really want to try and get across this afternoon. And that's based upon the concepts which Kant delivered, Dilthey extended into including history into it, and something that's been mentioned this afternoon in the study of text, although it hasn't had its particular meaning put to it, the hermeneutic task. How all this stuff, hermeneutic just means Hermes, you know, the messenger of the gods. How do you interpret a text? Now, it doesn't matter which text that is, but particularly with sacred texts of any sort. So those things are all connected in this question of a concept of worldviews. Primarily, one needs to think about how you can gain knowledge. Is it through church teaching? Is it through the state's observations? Or is it through the application of your own personal reason? In society and the history of ideas, we've been moving all the time to an increasing personal autonomy. And that's what's going on here. So we're trying to produce students, pupils, students, and adults who can make decisions personally out of their autonomy of their own personal reason. For that, they need knowledge-based subjects. That's the view. Whether you agree with that view or whether you don't, that's the different matter. But that's the view. I don't want to take up too much more of your time on the worldviews thing. I have given the notes, and you might want to have a look at those. But I do think that this book of essays very strongly emphasizes that the legal requirements for the composition of Sacre should change. Now, you may or may not know, in the time, well, certainly in the time I've been on Rutland Sacre, we've never actually put anything to a vote. That's not a criticism, but we've all fortunately agreed very happily. And that's a good thing, really. We didn't have a terrible dispute, in fact, about Andrew joining us, and I'm delighted that we didn't. Well done. But some Sacres have had, and they've had this question of the vote. And at the moment, you may know from the information we're given that there are these groups on Sacre. And each group has its own one vote, except the Church of England representatives, where each representative has a vote. So you can see that the Church of England is heavily represented, still carrying out the functions primarily of the 44 Act. Although there may be more individualized liberal views on individual members of their representatives. So they're calling for a legal requirement for the changing of the structure of not only what Sacre is called, it should be called a local area network, and it should contain different people. It says it should contain teachers of religion. That's a very important point. It's not religions, it's religion, the subject of religion and worldviews from all phases, including higher education. There should be representatives, school leaders and governors, providers, school providers, including local authority, multi-academic trusts and dioceses, etc., religion, belief, and other groups that support RE in schools or wish to do so. And this might include local museums and galleries, as well as religion and belief groups, and a restructuring of the voting system. So it's a radical book suggesting ideas that are probably over the next 50 years going to happen anyway, but ones which are exciting to be involved in. Worldviews is worth having. Please, if you have a moment, have a look at the note and you might get some clearer idea rather than my exposition this afternoon. I could take questions if you want.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. That was a very insightful explanation of it. I've certainly there's a lot to think about, and I've learned a lot from what you just said. Okay, let's have some questions first. Andrew.
You've taken some of my thunder, Rosemary. I'm just going to congratulate Peter on his eloquence, clarity, and I've of course have had the opportunity of reading the notes you sent through. I did learn a few things. He won't be surprised that I agree with a lot of it.
Yes, of course.
And I think his contribution is probably so valuable. He should be congratulated. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Any other particular comments or questions? Just sort of from a very pragmatic point, as far as this Sacre is concerned, obviously, I think all those that discussion about the legal requirements and membership are really interesting. But do you see that actually happening in the short term, medium term, or at the moment we are with the current legal requirements, obviously, or is there anything?
Are you asking me that?
Yes, I am asking you that.
Okay. I don't think there's anything that this Sacre needs to do in a pragmatic sense. I think it needs to have some concepts in place about these discussions, but I think actually it takes place at a political level.
Exactly. Okay.
Because it's a relationship primarily between the church and the state. And you may know that the Church of England is a state religion. And so it would have to be changed by Act of Parliament.
Yeah. Okay, but I think it's good for this Sacre through people who to actually keep up to date with what the arguments are and what's happening.
Yes.
So on the other side, the whole concept of this worldviews, which is a reason why we sort of put it in with this discussion on the agreed syllabus, is any scope or options that this Sacre feeds in about either what the syllabus is called, and also how the terminology within the syllabus is actually portrayed. Is that, and so that whole thinking about the worldviews, I think is relevant to that in terms of how we take this forward. Is that right?
I think it's right, and I would emphasize in a much more pragmatic sense that it's most important, and I can't emphasize this enough, that the terminology is religion, not religions.
No.
That's really important. Religion and worldview. So your subject is religion, not the discussion of any specific world faith, but religion and worldviews, and not in that order either. You could put worldviews and religion.
Okay.
Because you're discussing them as an Enlightenment concept. So it's religion and worldviews, please, needs to be the way we discuss this, not religions and worldviews. And if we do nothing else but that, I'd be very grateful. And I think we would be in the advance of thinking about this subject.
Right, thank you. Amanda. Oh.
It's going back to this discussion I had with secondary schools last year of the idea that actually religion is, you can see it as a Western thought on religion, and a different, an Eastern, in a way, an Eastern thought. And I don't mean that in the way of Hinduism and Sikhism. It's in a way cultural and traditional to the parts of the world that you live in, not necessarily. It's under getting our pupils to understand that. And this kind of comes into this kind of ways of knowing, of actually and understanding actually where all this comes into, where it comes from.
One of the great things about Dilthey was this: he extended it, the whole idea of epistemology from Kant, from Immanuel Kant, to take in cultural concepts and history. So worldviews, from his viewpoint, contains the very things that you're discussing.
Yeah.
So they are, I suppose, in briefly, contextual.
Yeah, and James enlightened that was having the kind of social context, the theology and the philosophy, and there's now the idea that you add on the historical context
Well,
of religion.
Yes, any good philosophy and theology contains the history of ideas.
Yeah, and this is what we sometimes forget with our pupils, that if you're looking at religion and where they come from, you need to put the historical context of where they came from, and where the historical context of where some of those thoughts have come from as well, and how that affects as well.
Yes, but I would emphasize again, we're not actually talking about the study of world faiths. We're talking about the study of a subject called religion.
Okay, no, that's interesting. Lucy, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, just to say that this feels very right and comfortable, and where in my head I imagine religion heading in terms of an academic subject. And to echo other comments, thank you ever so much, Peter, and it's a shame we can't have this going through all of the curriculum. Then we can unpick Michael Gove. And yes, I do know I'm conservative, but I have publicly said I've always been in a disagreement on this particular feature. So thank you.
Thank you. James has your hand up, and then Gunnar. Do you still got your hand up, James?
It is, but it's going to come down again now, but I'm still going to speak if that's all right. No, I was just going to say that this is a proposal still. I mean, this isn't set in aspect. I mean, it's not the only way of looking at, say, a new name or reformulating a concept. Just to let you know that other people have other ideas, and one other idea might be to do with values. So you might want to look at life and what life means to individuals, children, on the basis of seeing society as the promotion of values and how we engage with that. So there's another idea for you.
Okay.
Well, the book has taken up those points, and it discusses those under the subject of ethics, which is part of the study of the concept of religion. So it doesn't leave out your point, James, and thank you for making it. But I didn't discuss that this afternoon because I wanted to stay specifically on worldview. Yeah, I don't know whether I'm just sort of repeating or whether I'm adding to this. I heard a set of lectures just recently, which were extremely insightful. They were the Cadbury lectures, actually, and this idea of the society that we live in now is full of organizations promoting their own values. So this is the experience of people today, whether it's in their workplace or whether it's in the church or whether it's in all sorts of different organizations, institutions, authorities that we are interacting with all the time, probably have their own set of values. It seems to be the thing to do these days. Every organization has its own set of values. And so engaging with that, which is what we have to do all the time, when we're trying to understand who we are and where we stand and how we're contributing and how we meet the standard or whether we don't meet the standard, all this sort of thing, is quite a relevant thing in this day and age.
Okay, thank you. Good.
Just echoing some of the earlier points that Peter, I thought it was fantastic, how you pull that together and the way you presented it as well. Thank you very much for that. There's a couple of thought-provoking things that came to my mind, which I hadn't really thought about until you mentioned it again here, which was the thing about the Butler Act. And this in itself, in what this book shows, is potentially a direction of travel or a place to end an outcome, and it decouples from the Butler Act, which from our experience certainly on the Peterborough Sacre, we almost put that to one side, and in practice we're closer to this, not that far advanced, but closer to that. But actually I didn't realise we're coupled to the Butler Act. And whatever we do, we are always going to be pulled back towards it unless it's decoupled.
Yes.
And that's quite fundamental. I think also, just the further point, I mean, again, you summarised it really well at the beginning, which was the inclusive composition, the wider remit. But what it draws out, as it becomes less and less academic, and forgive me, this is probably beyond my capacity in what I'm going to say, as it becomes not so much academic, as it becomes less and less about religious education and more into the wider aspects, i.e. the more inclusive and wider remit, then it becomes harder and harder to measure, and it becomes harder and harder also to resource when we're struggling from day one to start with. So it's not a question of saying this is the wrong direction. This is just a pragmatic recognition of we're struggling with what we're doing now. This will make it not easy.
Yes. Well, I'd like to thank you for that, Gerd. But I'd like to reassure you as much as I possibly can, because if you go into an Enlightenment subject, physics, chemistry, mathematics, or whatever else you choose, they have their own methodologies. And the suggestion here, which hasn't been taken up very carefully, but it would need to be so, religion and worldviews would have its own methodology. This methodology would be primarily to do with the humanities, and there is a well-established methodology there. I've mentioned one aspect of that, hermeneutics. The literary criticism is another aspect of it, and it would pick up its own methodologies. It has its own object of study, religion, and it has its own object and worldview, and it has its own outcomes that it can measure. The whole reason for this movement is movement towards a more objective basis of rational reasoning and evidence base, epistemology. So there would be things that you could measure.
That then sorry, just as a final point, that then come back to one of my very early points. When a young person goes through school and thinks about RE, they can think about English and understand exactly what it will give them. And the same with physics and or maths. How you describe RE just now, Peter, I think that then brings it into that category.
Yes, it does very much. You're quite right about that. And also, I would say the essays, and it is, I was only talking about this book. I wasn't talking about other books. This book is talking about starting this subject much later than is presently done, at much later age.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Thank you very much again for that, Peter, and thank you to everybody for involvement and contribution to those discussions, which are, fundamental and very interesting and thought-provoking. And so item 12 is any other urgent business? Nothing? And Amanda's got something.
I think you all received this today. It was actually to do with it was a document I sent over yesterday. I think Joe, you did send it around on it's just the recovery kind of framework for all the curriculum subjects. I just thought it was interesting to say for you to have a look at what the government was actually suggesting for RE and RE next year.
Okay, all right. Hopefully everyone can have a chance to read that. And our next meeting is the 12th of October, where hopefully we might be meeting in person, but we'll wait for future developments on how the council chamber is being used, etc. So we'll call the meeting to an end at just about 6:15. And again, thank you. It's really, really interesting and thought-provoking discussions, and also I think some action on and thoughts about the agreed syllabus, and also good to hear about the feedback from schools. So thank you everybody, and thank you Joe for clerking, and because I think this is the first one you've done for quite a long time.
Yes.
So thank you very much for keeping up with that, and see you all again in October.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.